One of the most extraordinary elections in U.S. history ends with an extraordinary outcome, a return to the White House most rare. And with a pending announcement from Mayor Duggan on his political plans, a reminder that the campaign wheels never stop turning. Today is Sunday, November 10th, 2024, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. We finally made our way through the craziest, most unusual election season in memory. It was unconventional, it was bitter, it was insanely expensive, and when the dust cleared on Wednesday morning, the same deeply divided America remained on display. Trump supporters were festive and gleeful, and Harris supporters looked like the shock survivors of a devastating hurricane. We knew history was going to be made. Kamala Harris was trying to become the first woman president, but instead, Donald Trump became the first president since Grover Cleveland to win non-consecutive terms in the White House. I'm going to guess you have heard enough of the recaps and the autopsies over what happened on Tuesday night. So coming up this morning, we're going to look ahead to what's next. I'll be joined by two newly re-elected members of Congress, Republican Lisa McClain and Democrat Debbie Dingell, to talk about the next chapter of American political life. And speaking of next chapters, this coming week, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan has an announcement about where he's headed. We'll talk about the outlook for the upcoming races for governor and mayor of Detroit, all today on Flashpoint. All right, we're going to start this morning with two members of Congress who won their way back to the nation's capital. From Michigan's 6th District, Democrat Debbie Dingell, and from Michigan's 9th District, Republican Lisa McClain. So glad to have both of you with me this morning. And first off, congratulations to both of you. I told you earlier I want to spend most of our time talking about the future, but let me start by just letting you both reflect a little bit on what happened in this election, not only returning Donald Trump to the White House, but also flipping the United States Senate. Congresswoman McClain, let me start with you.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think the American people sent a message to all lawmakers, really, on both sides, is they want the country to go in a different direction. They want inflation to come down. They want the border to be secure. They want to jumpstart the economy. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we listen to what our constituents have to say and follow their lead, because at the end of the day, we really do work for them.
The incumbent on the incumbents. I like that. Congresswoman Dingell, your thoughts on what happened this past week? I know you're not as upbeat, right?
Well, actually, maybe I'm not as depressed as everybody else was, because I was on the ground. You know what I'm like on a weekend. I'm in the union halls. I'm at the farmers markets, the veterans, the schools. I'm listening to everybody. And I think Democrats have to do some soul searching. They have to pay attention to the message that was sent on Tuesday. But I also think, and I think you're going to hear Lisa and I talk about that the American people are, even though Donald Trump is not always the best example of it, they want to see us work together. They're worried about the grocery bills. They're worried about the cost of gasoline. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about supply chains that are overseas and want to bring them home. And I'm going to work with President Trump. He won in that. I also believe that the people spoke, that I will work. I respect the office of the presidency. I will work with the president and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, as I always do. And it is very important to have a peaceful transition of government.
Yeah. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention, I think that each of you, and many of us are worried about the divide in America. It's been such a bitter year of campaigning. I think each of you believes, though, when it comes to Michigan, that you have a real ally in each other. Is that fair to say, Congresswoman McClain?
Yeah, that's very fair to say. I mean, Debbie and I have worked on several issues, whether it's veteran issues, Great Lakes issues. There are more issues that unite us than divide us. And I think that's where Debbie and I have been so successful is, you know, when I'm in a Democratic controlled House with a Democratic president, I can still be conservative, but we can find things that we agree upon, like I said earlier, like veterans issue. I mean, Debbie is very passionate about veterans issues, as am I, and we work and we collaborate together to bring common sense solutions for our veterans. And the same goes with the Great Lakes. The problem is you don't really get that coverage all the time. I wish we got a little bit more of it, because I think that truly is American people want to see that we're working together to get things done for them.
Yeah. Congresswoman Dingell, you want to weigh in on that too?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, Lisa's named a couple of issues. I'll start with, we're both very good at being cheerleaders for the University of Michigan as well, and bipartisanly supported that championship all the way last year. But the auto industry, manufacturing, understanding these supply chain issues, we totally work on that. And I'll give you a new one we're working on right now. Mike Bouchard, sheriff of Oakland County, a month ago when there was that horrific murder and kidnapping or whatever of the couple in Oakland County where the jeweler was murdered.
Right.
He talked about not being able to get access to the information that he needed right away on the cell phone. And I said, Mike, will you explain it to us? And said, Lisa, let's go to lunch with Mike together, because when people are giving consent to have access to a phone company shouldn't be denied access to a phone. So we listen to the people of Michigan, and when we see that something needs to be addressed, we call each other up and say, we need to go talk about this.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple of specific issues and what you think is ahead for these. Let's start with health care. Congresswoman McClain, for about 14 years now, Republicans have vowed to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. That obviously hasn't happened, even though it's been brought up a number of times. And there really doesn't seem to be a great alternative health care plan yet. What's the future of health care in America to you?
Well, I think the future of healthcare in America is we have to do better. We have to bring costs down. We have to bring prescription drug prices down. This is a very complex issue. And what I know about this issue is everyone is in agreement on the end result. We might disagree on how to get there, but both sides of the aisle want to make sure that we provide health care that's affordable, right? So I haven't heard much talk about repealing the Affordable Care Act. The talk that I've heard is we have to do better for our constituents in terms of pricing, accessibility, things of that nature.
Congresswoman Dingell, your late husband, John, was sitting right there next to Barack Obama when that was signed into law. Do you fear for the future of the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I don't know if I fear for the future. He certainly, the president has said he would repeal it, but Lisa's in leadership on the House side, and it gives me comfort that she hasn't heard much about that. I'll tell you something that we've got to lower the price of drugs, and we have a real vulnerability in this country at how much of our medicine is made in China and India. Almost 90% of our drugs are made overseas. And that is a national security issue, not just an economic security issue. We learned it during COVID. We understood, all of us understood it when we couldn't get masks, gowns, and gloves. I bet that's something we will be able to work on together and must work on together.
Let's talk about trade, so important, of course, to the state of Michigan. Congresswoman McClain, economists have been a little bit confounded by Donald Trump's claims that the tariffs that he wants to levy on goods coming into America, the economists believe that will be very inflationary and that Americans are the ones who end up picking up the tab. And this is an acute issue for the state of Michigan. What do you think is ahead for trade, especially with China?
The number one thing that we want is a fair trading arena. And what I see a little bit different, I have a little bit different take, is President Trump doesn't go out there and say, hey, I'm just going to willy-nilly put tariffs. They're usually reactionary. And it is a tool that we have in our belt to make sure that we're playing on a fair trading field. So if you're going to put tariffs on our products, we're not going to sit idly by and say, okay, if you made agreements with us, whether it be Mexico with agriculture or whatever it may be, we expect you to hold those commitments. So if you're not going to hold your commitments, why should we hold ours? But I also think one thing very interesting is if you're going to put tariffs on somebody, and I think we are, you may see that for a short term. However, if you even put the threat out there of tariffs, that might be just what it takes to get these other countries in line to play fairly with us.
Congresswoman Dingell, give me your take on tariffs and a trade war.
Okay, so I'm probably even stronger, to your surprise, than Lisa is. In 2016, I said Donald Trump won his election because of trade policy. And I said NAFTA was one of the worst policies we had ever seen. And I worked with him to help get the USMCA and make it better than NAFTA. We do need to put tariffs on China and electric vehicles. China subsidizes its products and it doesn't pay a decent wage. And if we're going to be competitive, we need that level playing field. I feel the same way about steel. So I may not be for blanket tariffs, but we need a level playing field when it comes to trade. And I think this is an area you don't want to see increased costs, but we need to understand when other countries are subsidizing, and then China down the road, when they've killed our markets, are going to come in and up their prices. This is a tool in our toolbox, and I strongly support him on strengthening our trade policy.
Lastly, I only got about a minute left, but I want to let you both tell me what you believe the #1 priority is among your constituents. You both come from, obviously, Michigan, but you both come from very different districts. Lisa McClain, first, what do you think is the #1 priority for the folks who just elected you back to Congress?
Economy. The economy, the economy, the economy. Yes, borders are important, healthcare is important, that's all important. But the #1 issue I see is people can't afford groceries. They can't, they're putting it on their credit card. They can't afford to buy houses. So we have got to take a look at what do we do to jumpstart our economy? What do we need to do to make sure that people in Michigan especially have jobs to go to, good quality, high-paying jobs to go to. That's the #1 issue. Less regulation, less taxes, and more opportunity. That all falls under the economic umbrella.
Last 20 seconds of yours, Congresswoman Dingell. What does your district want?
Economy. It is about economy and jobs, jobs, jobs. Although I don't think we should give billionaire tax cuts, I think we should be helping make working men and women's lives more affordable.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman Lisa McClain, again, congratulations to both of you on your re-election, and I'm so appreciative of the time today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care. We'll be right back. Bring in Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson next with their thoughts on what's ahead. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, welcome back. Let's continue this morning by starting to make the turn to the next big elections of consequence in both Michigan and Detroit. Joining me now, Nolan Finley, editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the host of Created Equal on WDET. And I have the two guys behind the Civility Project, which, boy, if you both could inject America with that right now would be good if you've spent any time at all on social media this past couple of weeks. I mostly want to spend our time talking about the future, as I said to the both congresswomen. But let me let you both weigh in a little bit on your reflections, because the three of us haven't been together since election night. So talk to me a little bit about what your takeaway is.
Well, it's still all about the economy, and Democrats didn't want to believe that going into this election. They thought they could squeeze one more victory out of abortion, and that they could convince the American people, the economy's not as bad as you think it is. And so they didn't talk about those issues. The pocketbook issues, the inflation that has been driving people crazy and getting them so worked up against the Biden administration. Had they been aware of where voters were in terms of their concerns, they would have never picked someone from that administration to run for president. CNN had a terrific fever chart on the other night, showed a map of the United States, all the counties where household incomes had grown faster than the cost of living. It was like 10, 12 counties.
Yeah,
I mean,
not much.
So people are feeling the pain the White House never wanted to acknowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the economy was obviously very much on people's minds, and it motivated the people who did come out to vote. The other thing, though, is the lack of turnout in some really key places. The Democrats have got to figure out how to reconnect with the core in places like Detroit. They do have to reconnect with white working class voters who were mad about the economy. But you see this flip in Dearborn with the Arab American population. Is that a one-time thing, or is that a defection? There are a lot of issues that surfaced here that if you're the Democrats, I think you got to spend some time really thinking about what is the party, what's the coalition that you put together that works. It used to be the old base with white working class Americans. That coalition is fraying, and it's fraying more frequently.
You both mentioned the Civility Project. Can you see, I'm having a crisis of imagination on this right now. Can you see a way that the country kind of heals and comes together, or are we in for 4 more years of absolute stark division?
You know, I was a little surprised that the reaction after the election wasn't more intense. Remember the last time Trump was elected, you had riots for 3 days in major cities and on college campuses. You haven't seen that. There's a lot of angst, but I think a lot of people are just saying, you know, we've been through this before, got through, you know, we'll get through this time.
I don't remember there being riots after the election last time.
There were.
There were riots after George Floyd was killed.
No, there were violent demonstrations on campuses and cities.
I think they were demonstrations. The Republicans call any group of more than 5 black people as a violent demonstration.
A lot of people got arrested for burning stuff down, but Democrats see that as peaceful protest.
Yeah, well, I mean,
can we come back together?
I think that's going to be very
hard. Not here.
Not here. That's going to be very hard. This is a president who has promised some really violent things of his own. Violence against the freedoms that we have as Americans, violence against the equality we assume between us, violence against people who just want to be Americans. I don't think people are just going to sit back and take that for the next 4 years. So
we are already starting to see, though, an interesting turn into the next election cycle, which is actually, of course, not that far away. Mayor Mike Duggan has an announcement planned this next week, apparently Wednesday. It won't surprise anybody. In fact, he hasn't even been trying to be coy about his eye maybe on the governor's race and no longer being mayor of the city of Detroit. There are so many different dominoes that fall out of that in both of those spaces, both who will run for governor and who will run for mayor. But give me your outlook on what you're watching here.
Well, I think he'll be giving people a chance in Detroit to decide whether they want to run for mayor or not. And there's a pretty broad field of people who might get in the race. And I think because of what Duggan has done over these past so many years, Detroit is better positioned to transfer leadership to sort of the next generation. There's a lot of promise.
It's always been a little bit of an Achilles heel, creating that next generation of leaders.
I think it's out there now. I think they've got a good pool of potential leaders. Will they be Mike Duggan? No, but will they be good mayors? You know, quite probably they will.
We have more qualified people who've already raised their hands for this job this time than we've had in the last 3 elections. If you think of after 2009 when Duggan runs in 2013, voters haven't had much choice. Duggan has been far and away the preferred choice and probably the better choice in all of those elections. I feel like already the field that's coming together, it has more heft to it than we've seen, and that's a good thing. That says that the city's political class is kind of healing itself still after the Kilpatrick meltdown, which took out an entire generation of potential leadership.
Throw out a few names. I mean, Mary Sheffield.
Mary Sheffield has said she wants to run. Santil Jenkins. That's a really good, I think, strong, qualified candidate. I'm not saying I'm voting for any of these people yet. I don't know. But I don't feel like they would not be ready for the job or not qualified for the job. Fred Durhall
who's
on city
kind of
council,
putting together an exploratory committee.
Yeah, someone who's been in the legislature, now been on council, has some experience to bring to the job. Even if Coleman Young were to run again, I mean, he's such a different person now than he was several years ago. It's not as if we will be struggling to find somebody who can manage the job.
Hill Harper might
Hill
get
Harper
back
could
in the
get
race.
Yeah.
You know, who knows?
Yeah.
And Garland Gilchrist may come to his senses and run for mayor. I think he could win
Well
that
said.
race.
That not me.
Because that's the other interesting part of this. We could see quite a battle of titans on the Democratic run for governor if Mike Duggan is in there, Jocelyn Benson, Pete Buttigieg's name keeps coming up, and Garland Gilchrist. That would be quite a roster on the Democratic side anyway.
You may have some state lawmakers who jump in as well. It is quite a roster, and presumably they've learned something from this election, and they will sharpen their message and reach out to some of the communities that Steve mentioned that Democrats have ignored, looked past. Any one of those candidates would be a formidable candidate. Republican side,
Yeah, I was going to ask, what about the other side?
Still a little fuzzier. I think Kevin Rinke may get back in. Tom Limerick has indicated under certain circumstances he would get back in. What about Mike Rogers, who ran pretty impressive race against a mound of money the other night and finished a whisker outside of it? I think he would be an impressive candidate for Republicans.
In fact, that reminds me of my old pal Tim Pamplin and I were texting this past week. We want to meet the people who voted Trump Slotkin.
I had a caller
because
to
there
the
were
show.
obviously quite a few of them.
I had a caller to the show from Bloomfield Hills, 32-year-old, who said he did that, voted for Trump and then voted for Slotkin, had all kinds of reasons.
I think that speaks more to the weakness of the Harris campaign and the lack of her appeal than it does to Trump's.
We wondered if running in just a span of 3 to 4 months was an advantage. Maybe that, in the end, maybe it was a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the governor's race and what you're seeing there.
I think it's early, but again, I think we'll have a lot of choices on the Democratic side. I think the fact that there aren't so many choices or obvious choices on the Republican side speaks to what this election, this presidential election, was not. This was not a blowout mandate kind of election where it's clear the Republican message is resonating so much more with people than the Democratic message. Nationwide, 11 million people who voted in 2020 didn't bother to show up in 2024. Now
but he can claim he can claim a mandate in a new way. Finally, the Republicans won the popular vote.
Yes, for the first time since 2004. First time since 1988 in a non-wartime election. No question. But when that many people sit home, that is saying much more about dissatisfaction with the process and the system than it is about enthusiasm about the person who wins. I'm not taking anything from them.
Even though people like us sensed this great energy and motivation to vote.
Democrats in 26 will be facing a much different Republican Party than they did in 22. Pete Hoekstra has whipped that party into shape. The donors are back.
Raising money.
The organization has come together. They're going to face a lot stiffer challenge because of that than they did last time around.
Perry Johnson might be another name that comes
There you
back
go.
around again, too. You never know. Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for the conversation, as always. It was civil, which is no surprise at all between the two of you. We'll wrap things up for Flashpoint right after this. And just like that, we are all out of time. Thanks so much for being here. Meet the Press is coming up next. Have a great week. We'll see you next time back here for Flashpoint.